store manager calls black customer a thief, not knowing she's the head of police. "Excuse me, miss, but I saw you slip something into your bag," the store manager said loudly, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of shoppers. Heads turned as the woman, a tall, poised black customer in a crisp dark suit, froze mid-step near the checkout lane. Her sharp, piercing eyes fixed on the manager with an expression that mixed disbelief and irritation. "I beg your pardon," she asked, her voice steady but firm. The manager crossed his arms, his face reddening. "Don't play innocent with me. I know a thief when I see one." His words echoed through the store, making shoppers whisper among themselves. The woman let out a slow, measured breath and reached into her pocket. From it, she pulled out a sleek leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up for the manager and everyone else to see. A gold badge gleamed in the fluorescent light. "I'm Chief Angela Porter, head of the city's police department. Would you like to repeat what you just said?" The color drained from the manager's face. His arms dropped to his sides, and he stammered, "I didn't mean." "Save it," Angela interrupted sharply. She turned to the stunned crowd of shoppers. "Did anyone here see me steal anything? Speak now." Silence fell over the store. Shoppers exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. Angela's gaze returned to the manager. "What was it you think I stole? Be specific." The manager's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Angela stepped closer to him, her authoritative presence making him shrink back. "I'm giving you one last chance to explain yourself before this becomes a very public matter," she warned. The tension in the room was palpable. Then, just as the manager tried to fumble an explanation, Angela's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and frowned. "Hold that thought," she said icily. She stepped away to answer the call, leaving the manager sweating and the crowd buzzing with speculation. The day had started out like any other for Angela Porter. She'd left her home early that morning, wearing her usual no-nonsense attire and carrying her badge and gun securely tucked away. Being the head of the city's police department came with its challenges, but Angela loved her job. She was proud to serve her community and even prouder to do so as a black woman in a position of power. After a grueling morning filled with back-to-back meetings, Angela decided to take a short break. She stopped by a small grocery store near downtown to pick up a few items for dinner. It was an unassuming place, one she'd visited a handful of times before. She liked its quiet charm and the way the staff mostly left her alone. Angela moved through the aisles quickly, selecting her items with precision. A box of pasta, a bottle of olive oil, a jar of marinara sauce. She carried everything in her hands, avoiding the need for a shopping basket. As she reached the end of the aisle, she spotted a small display of chocolate bars and grabbed one impulsively. Tucking it under her arm, she made her way toward the checkout counter. It was there that things started to unravel. She noticed the store manager standing near the front, watching her intently. At first, she thought nothing of it. People often stared at her, either out of admiration for her striking appearance or because they recognized her as the police chief. But the manager's gaze felt different, sharp, almost accusatory. Angela paid for her items, sliding her credit card through the reader and thanking the cashier. As she turned to leave, the manager stepped in front of her, blocking her path. That was when he'd made the accusation that left her stunned. Angela replayed the moment in her head as she spoke on the phone, pacing near the entrance of the store. The voice on the other end was her deputy, Sergeant Mitchell, updating her on a recent case. She listened intently, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the confrontation. When the call ended, Angela returned to the checkout area. The manager was still there, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I hope you used the time I gave you to think carefully about your actions," Angela said. Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it that made the manager flinch. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered. Angela crossed her arms. "The only misunderstanding here is you thinking it's acceptable to single me out and accuse me of stealing without any evidence." "I wasn't singling you out," he protested. "It's just, we've had problems with shoplifting before, and I thought." "You thought wrong," Angela cut him off. "And your assumptions are rooted in prejudice. Tell me, how often do you accuse your white customers of shoplifting?" The manager's face turned bright red. I don't. I mean." "Exactly," Angela said, her voice cold. "You don't. But when you saw a black woman in your store, you jumped to conclusions. Do you understand how serious this is? You not only humiliated me in front of everyone here, but you also undermined your own credibility as a business." The shoppers were silent, their eyes fixed on the confrontation. Some nodded in agreement, their expressions supportive. Others simply looked uncomfortable. Angela scanned the room, then turned back to the manager. "This isn't over," she said firmly. "I'll be filing a formal complaint against this store. And if I find out that this kind of treatment is a pattern here, you'll be dealing with more than just me." Angela picked up her bags and walked toward the exit, her head held high. But as she reached the door, a voice from the crowd called out, "Wait. There's something you should know." Angela stopped and turned around, her curiosity piqued. The person stepped forward, their face full of urgency. "It's about the manager," they said. "You need to hear this." The room fell silent again as Angela waited for the person to speak. What they said next would send shockwaves through the store and change the course of the day entirely. Angela's sharp gaze locked onto the speaker, a young woman with wide, nervous eyes. "Go on," Angela said, her voice steady but commanding. The woman hesitated, glancing nervously at the manager, whose face had gone pale. He's done this before," she finally said. Her words were barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the store, they carried like a shout. "He accused my brother of stealing a few months ago. My brother didn't do anything, but the police were called, and it was this whole ordeal." Angela's eyes narrowed. "Is that so?" She turned her attention back to the manager, who was now visibly sweating. "Care to explain this?" The manager opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The young woman spoke again, her voice stronger now. "He targets people like us. Black customers. He watches us like hawks the moment we step inside. A lot of people have stopped coming here because of him." Angela's expression grew colder with each word. She turned to the crowd, scanning their faces. "Is this true? Has anyone else experienced this kind of treatment here?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, a few hands went up. A middle-aged man near the back of the store raised his voice. "He's followed me around the aisles more times than I can count. I thought about saying something, but I figured it wouldn't make a difference." A woman near the produce section added, "He accused my teenage son of stealing a soda last year. Made him empty his backpack right here in front of everyone. He didn't find anything, but he didn't even apologize." Angela looked back at the manager, her expression icy. "It seems you have a pattern, mister." She left the question hanging, waiting for him to respond. "Davis," he mumbled. "My name is Greg Davis." "Well, Mr. Davis," Angela said, her voice dripping with authority, "you have a lot to answer for. Do you realize the damage you're causing? The harm you're inflicting on innocent people with your baseless accusations?" "I didn't mean to." Greg started, but Angela cut him off. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't even try to justify this. You think it's acceptable to humiliate people, to treat them like criminals, just because of the color of their skin." Greg opened his mouth, but Angela didn't give him a chance to respond. "This stops now," she continued. "Not just here, but everywhere. People like you need to be held accountable." The tension in the store was suffocating. Greg looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock, but Angela wasn't finished. She turned to the young woman who had spoken up. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jasmine," the woman replied. "Jasmine, thank you for having the courage to speak out," Angela said. "Your voice matters. All of your voices matter," she added, looking around the room. "If you've been wronged, you deserve justice. And I'll make sure you get it." Angela pulled out her phone and began typing. "I'm documenting everything," she said. "If any of you want to file a complaint or share your experiences, now's the time." One by one, people came forward, sharing their stories. Angela listened carefully, taking notes and asking follow-up questions when necessary. By the time she was done, she had a detailed record of Greg Davis's actions over the past few years. As she prepared to leave, Angela looked Greg in the eye. "I'll be reporting this to the corporate office," she said. "And to the local news. Don't think for a second that you can sweep this under the rug." Greg looked like he might faint. "Please," he stammered. I didn't mean." Angela held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it," she said. "You've done enough damage." She turned and walked out of the store, her head held high. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from Sergeant Mitchell. "Chief, we've got a situation. Call me ASAP. Angela's heart sank. She dialed Mitchell's number and pressed the phone to her ear. What's going on? She asked. Mitchell's voice was tense. We've got a hostage situation at the courthouse. Armed suspect, multiple hostages, and it's escalating fast. Angela's mind raced. The courthouse was only a few blocks away. I'm on my way, she said. She ended the call and began walking briskly toward the courthouse, her earlier confrontation with Greg Davis temporarily pushed to the back of her mind. As Angela approached the courthouse, she saw the flashing lights of police cars and the crowd of onlookers gathered outside. Officers were setting up a perimeter, their faces grim. Angela pushed through the crowd, her badge held high. What's the situation? She asked Mitchell, who was standing near the command post. Mitchell gestured toward the building. Suspect is holed up in one of the courtrooms on the second floor. He's got 6 hostages, including the judge. He's demanding a getaway vehicle and a plane out of the country. Angela nodded, her mind already formulating a plan. But just as she was about to give her orders, a deafening gunshot rang out from inside the courthouse. The crowd gasped, and Angela's stomach dropped. What just happened? She demanded. Mitchell's face was pale. We don't know, he said. But it doesn't sound good. Angela didn't hesitate. She turned to the nearest officer. Get me a direct line to whoever's inside, she ordered. The officer nodded and ran to the mobile command post, where the negotiator was stationed. The sound of another gunshot echoed from the courthouse, and the crowd behind the police barricades collectively gasped. Angela felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Every second mattered, and she knew there was no time to waste. She grabbed a bulletproof vest from one of the patrol cars and slipped it on as she made her way toward the command post. When she arrived, the negotiator handed her a headset. We've been trying to establish communication, he said, but he's not responding. Angela slipped the headset on and adjusted the microphone. Patch me in, she said. The negotiator flipped a switch, and Angela spoke directly into the line. This is Chief Angela Porter with the police department. Who am I speaking to? For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, a low, gravelly voice crackled through the headset. I'm the one holding the cards, Chief, the man said. And if you don't give me what I want, you're going to have a bloodbath on your hands. Angela's grip on the microphone tightened. I need you to stay calm, she said, her voice steady. No one wants this to end in violence. Let's talk about how we can resolve this safely. Safely, the man scoffed. There's no safe for me. You think I'm walking out of here alive? Not a chance. You don't have to hurt anyone, Angela replied. Tell me what you need. Let's figure this out together. The man didn't respond right away. Angela glanced at Mitchell, who was monitoring the situation through a live feed from a security camera inside the courthouse. The grainy footage showed the suspect, a wiry man in his 30s, pacing back and forth in the courtroom, a gun in his hand. The hostages were seated in a row against the wall, their hands raised in silent terror. You want to know what I need, the man finally said. His voice was laced with desperation. I need you to stop wasting my time and get me that plane. Angela exhaled slowly, choosing her next words carefully. I hear you, she said, but getting a plane takes time. While we're working on that, let's make sure everyone stays safe. Can you do that for me? The man's laugh was cold and bitter. You think I'm stupid? You're stalling. You're not getting me anything. I'm not stalling, Angela said firmly. I'm trying to help you. But I can't do that unless you work with me. The man's pacing grew more erratic, and Angela could see his grip on the gun tightening. She knew she needed to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled out of control. What's your name? She asked. Why do you care? He shot back. Because I want to talk to you like a person, Angela said. Not just a voice on the other end of the line. Tell me your name. The man hesitated, then muttered, It's Eric. Okay, Eric, Angela said. Let's take this one step at a time. I'm here to listen. Tell me what's going on. Why are you doing this? Eric's voice cracked as he spoke. You wouldn't understand. None of you would. Try me, Angela said gently. You might be surprised. There was a long pause, and for a moment, Angela thought Eric might actually open up. But then, another gunshot rang out from the courtroom. Angela's heart leapt into her throat as she saw the security feed go blurry for a moment before clearing. One of the hostages had slumped over, blood pooling around their body. Eric. Angela shouted into the headset. "What are you doing? This isn't the way to get what you want." "Shut up," Eric screamed. "I told you I wasn't bluffing. You think I won't do it again?" Angela clenched her jaw, her mind racing. She turned to Mitchell. "We need eyes inside. Do we have anyone in position?" Mitchell nodded. "SWAT is on standby, but they're waiting for your call." Angela glanced at the feed again. The remaining hostages were trembling, their faces pale with fear. She knew she had to act fast, but rushing in without a plan could end in more bloodshed. She took a deep breath and spoke into the headset again. "Eric, listen to me. You don't have to do this. You can still walk out of here alive. Let's talk about how we can make that happen." Eric didn't respond. Angela's fingers tapped against the desk as she considered her next move. Finally, she made a decision. "Mitchell, get the team ready," she said quietly. "We're going to need a tactical breach." "Understood," Mitchell said, his voice grim. Angela leaned back into the microphone. "Eric, I'm asking you one last time. Put the gun down and let the hostages go. This doesn't have to end in tragedy." But Eric's voice crackled back through the headset, filled with venom. "It's already too late for that." Just then, another loud bang echoed from the courthouse. Angela's heart pounded as the feed cut out completely. A burst of static filled her headset, and then, nothing. The crowd outside the barricades erupted into panicked murmurs, and Angela turned to Mitchell, her jaw tight. "What just happened?" she demanded. Mitchell's face was pale. We don't know. The camera's down. We've lost visual." Angela didn't hesitate. She grabbed a radio and called out to the SWAT team. "Move in. Now." As the heavily armed officers stormed the courthouse, Angela followed close behind, her own weapon drawn. Her heart was pounding, but her focus was razor-sharp. She didn't know what awaited her inside, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't stop until every last hostage was safe. And until Eric was held accountable. Angela moved swiftly through the courthouse's grand entrance, her footsteps steady but silent. The SWAT team had already breached the perimeter and was moving up the staircase to the second floor where Eric and the hostages were last seen. The sound of boots against marble echoed through the hall, blending with the muffled murmurs of terrified onlookers outside. Her radio crackled as Sergeant Mitchell's voice came through. "Chief, the team is positioned outside the courtroom. No visual yet, but we're ready to breach on your command." Angela gripped her radio tightly. "Hold position until I get there. I want eyes on the situation before anyone moves." She climbed the stairs 2 at a time, her mind racing. The stakes were higher now. Eric had already proven he was willing to kill. If she didn't handle this perfectly, more lives would be lost. As she reached the second floor, she found the SWAT team huddled by the door to the courtroom. The team leader, a tall, broad man named Officer Ramirez, nodded at her arrival. "What's the status?" Angela asked in a low voice. Ramirez gestured toward the door. "No movement since the last gunshot. We can't hear anything from inside." Angela glanced at the door. It was heavy oak, with no windows to see through. She turned to one of the officers carrying a snake camera. "Let's get a look inside," she ordered. The officer nodded and quickly fed the flexible camera under the door. The small monitor in his hand lit up with a grainy image of the courtroom. Angela leaned in to see. Eric was standing near the judge's bench, pacing back and forth with his gun in hand. The hostages were still lined up against the wall, their faces pale and tear-streaked. One of them, a middle-aged man in a suit, was slumped over, a clear sign he was the victim of Eric's earlier gunshot. Angela's jaw tightened. She counted 5 hostages still alive, but their terror was palpable. She scanned the rest of the room, noting the positions of furniture and potential cover. Finally, she turned to Ramirez. "We need a diversion to draw his attention away from the hostages. Then we breach." Ramirez nodded. "Understood. What's the plan for engagement?" Angela considered her options. "I'll re-establish contact with him. If I can keep him talking, it'll give you time to move in. Once you're in position, we take him down. Lethal force only if absolutely necessary." Ramirez didn't look convinced. "With all due respect, Chief, he's already killed one hostage. He won't hesitate to do it again." "I know," Angela said, her tone firm. "But if we go in guns blazing, we risk killing the very people we're trying to save. We do this carefully, or not at all." Ramirez hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Angela pulled out her radio again and switched back to the line connected to Eric. She took a deep breath before speaking. Eric, it's Chief Porter again. Can you hear me? There was no response. She glanced at the monitor and saw Eric pause in his pacing, his head tilting slightly as if listening. She tried again. Eric, I'm still here. Let's keep talking. Finally, Eric's voice crackled through the headset. What's there to talk about? You're not giving me what I want. I told you I'm working on it, Angela said, keeping her tone calm. But I need you to trust me. Let the hostages go, and I'll make sure you get out of here safely. Eric barked out a laugh. You think I'm that stupid? The second I let them go, you'll come in here and put a bullet in me. No one wants that, Angela said. But the longer this goes on, the harder it'll be for me to help you. I need you to meet me halfway. Let's start with one hostage. Show me you're willing to cooperate, and I'll show you the same. Eric hesitated, his pacing slowing. On the monitor, Angela could see him glance toward the hostages. For a moment, it looked like he might actually listen. But then his face twisted into a snarl. Nice try, Chief. But I'm not letting anyone go until I get what I asked for. Angela's mind raced. She needed to keep him distracted long enough for the SWAT team to move into position. I get it, she said. You feel like you're out of options. Like no one's listening to you. But I'm listening, Eric. Tell me what's really going on. You don't care, Eric snapped. None of you do. People like me don't matter to people like you. Angela's voice softened. You're wrong about that. I care more than you think. But I can't help you if you don't let me in. What's this really about, Eric? What brought you here today? For a moment, Eric looked genuinely conflicted. His grip on the gun loosened slightly, and his expression shifted. You want to know, he said, his voice breaking. Fine. It's about my brother. He's dead because of people like you. Angela's heart skipped a beat. Your brother? What happened to him? Eric's voice grew louder, angrier. Cops shot him last year. Said he was resisting arrest, but that's a lie. He was unarmed, just like I am now. But none of you care. You don't care about people like us. Angela felt a pang of sympathy, but she knew she couldn't let it cloud her judgment. I'm sorry about your brother, Eric. I really am. But killing innocent people won't bring him back. Innocent. Eric spat. Are you sure about that? How innocent do you think you all are? On the monitor, Angela saw Eric raise his gun, aiming it toward the hostages. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her radio and whispered to Ramirez, Go. Now. The SWAT team moved in unison, breaching the door with a thunderous crack. Chaos erupted as they entered the room, shouting commands and taking strategic positions. Eric spun around, his gun swinging wildly, but before he could fire, Ramirez tackled him to the ground. Angela rushed into the courtroom, her weapon drawn. Hold your fire, she shouted. The SWAT team held back, their guns trained on Eric as Ramirez wrestled the gun from his hand. The hostages scrambled to their feet, some crying, others shaking uncontrollably. Angela gestured for the medics to move in and tend to them. She approached Eric, who was now pinned to the ground, his face twisted in fury. You could have done this the easy way, she said, her voice cold. But now, you'll answer for everything you've done. Eric glared up at her, his chest heaving. You think this is over? It's not over. People like you will never understand. Angela didn't respond. She turned to Ramirez. Cuff him and get him out of here. As the SWAT team escorted Eric away, Angela turned her attention to the hostages. You're safe now, she said, her voice softer. We'll get you the help you need. But just as she thought the nightmare was over, an officer burst into the room, his face pale. Chief, he said, his voice shaking. We've got another situation. There's a second suspect, and he's armed. Angela's blood ran cold. Where? She demanded. The officer pointed toward the courthouse basement. He's got a bomb. Angela froze for half a second, the weight of the officer's words hitting her like a tidal wave. A bomb. This wasn't just about Eric anymore, this was a coordinated attack. She snapped back into action, turning to the SWAT leader. Ramirez, secure the courtroom. I need medics in here now to evacuate the hostages. Get a team ready to sweep the building for additional threats. Yes, ma'am, Ramirez said, already barking orders into his radio. Angela followed the officer who had delivered the message, her mind racing. What do we know about the second suspect? She asked as they moved quickly through the courthouse halls. Not much, the officer admitted, his face pale with fear. Building maintenance staff reported seeing someone in the basement right before this all started. They thought it was suspicious, but didn't call it in until after the gunfire upstairs. Do we have eyes on the basement? Angela asked. The officer shook his head. Negative. No cameras down there. It's a blind spot. Angela's jaw tightened. Blind spots were the kind of vulnerability that people like Eric exploited, and now they were paying the price for it. She reached for her radio. Mitchell, I need the bomb squad dispatched immediately. Suspected explosive device in the courthouse basement. Understood, Chief. Mitchell's voice came through, calm but urgent. ETA 5 minutes. Angela picked up her pace, descending the stairs to the basement level. The air grew colder, the stark fluorescent lighting casting long, eerie shadows on the concrete walls. 2 officers were stationed near the stairwell, their weapons drawn. They straightened when Angela approached. Report, Angela ordered. Chief, we've blocked off all entrances to the basement, one of them said. But we haven't gone in yet. Waiting on your orders. Angela nodded. Good. We can't risk rushing in without knowing what we're dealing with. She scanned the hallway ahead, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. Have you heard anything? Movement? Voices? Nothing so far, the other officer replied. Angela turned to the first officer. Stay here and hold the perimeter. I want this entire level locked down, no one in or out. Yes, ma'am, the officer said, stepping back to his position. Angela pulled her radio again, this time switching to the bomb squad's frequency. This is Chief Porter. I need an update on your location. We're en route, a voice replied. 2 minutes out. Angela nodded to herself. 2 minutes wasn't much, but in a situation like this, it could feel like a lifetime. She turned to the officer by her side. Let's clear the immediate area. We don't want anyone too close if this goes sideways. As they moved down the hallway, Angela's sharp eyes caught a faint glow of light coming from under a door at the far end of the corridor. She held up a hand, signaling the officer to stop. There, she said in a low voice. Someone's inside. The officer nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. Angela reached for her radio again. Ramirez, I've got eyes on a potential location for the second suspect. Door at the end of the basement corridor. Sending coordinates now. Copy that, Ramirez replied. We're on standby if you need backup. Angela crouched low and moved closer to the door, her heart pounding but her focus unwavering. She stopped a few feet away and listened. Faint sounds filtered through the heavy wood, footsteps, the rustling of fabric, and a low rhythmic beeping. Her stomach dropped. That was the sound of a countdown. She motioned for the officer to fall back slightly as she spoke into her radio. We've got an active timer. Suspect is likely armed and dangerous. Bomb squad, what's your ETA? 1 minute, the bomb squad leader responded. Hold tight, Chief. Angela clenched her jaw. She didn't have a minute. If the suspect was preparing to detonate, she needed to act now. She raised her voice, speaking directly through the door. This is Chief Angela Porter. I know you're in there. Let's talk. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a muffled voice replied. Stay back. I'll blow this whole place sky high. Angela exhaled slowly, her mind racing. You don't have to do that, she said, keeping her tone calm. What's your name? Doesn't matter, the voice snapped. You're not getting in here. Angela took a step closer to the door. I'm not here to fight you. I just want to understand. What's your goal? Why are you doing this? You wouldn't understand, the man said, his voice bitter. This system is broken. People like you only care about yourselves. Angela's heart ached at the familiar anger in his tone. It was the same fury Eric had expressed, the same pain that had driven him to violence. But this time, the stakes were even higher. You're wrong about that, she said. I care more than you think. But if you go through with this, you're not fixing anything. You're just creating more pain. Pain is the only thing people notice, the man shouted. The beeping grew louder, and Angela's pulse quickened. Listen to me, she said urgently. You've got a choice right now. You can stop this. You can walk out of here alive. But if you detonate that bomb, you're ending your life and taking innocent people with you. Is that really what you want? The man didn't respond, but Angela could hear his breathing through the door, heavy and erratic. She pressed her hand against the cold wood. Talk to me, she pleaded. Tell me your name. Let me help you. The man's voice cracked. It's too late for that. It's never too late, Angela said firmly. You can still make this right. Suddenly, the beeping stopped. Angela froze, her breath catching in her throat. Was that a good sign, or a terrible one? Before she could react, the door swung open, and the man stepped out, holding a detonator in one hand and a device strapped to his chest. Angela's heart raced as she locked eyes with him. He was young, barely in his 20s, and his face was etched with desperation and fear. Don't come any closer, he shouted, his thumb hovering over the trigger. Angela held her hands up, her voice calm but firm. I'm not moving. Let's take this one step at a time. Behind her, she heard the soft shuffle of boots as the bomb squad finally arrived. Their leader, clad in a protective suit, gestured for Angela to keep him distracted. Let's talk about your brother, Angela said, her eyes never leaving the man. Eric told me about him. I know you're hurting. But this isn't the way to honor his memory. The man's hand trembled, his thumb pressing slightly on the detonator. Angela's breath caught. If he pressed any harder, it would all be over. You don't know anything about my brother, he snapped. You're right, Angela admitted. I don't. But I know he wouldn't want this for you. I know he'd want you to live. The man hesitated, his eyes filling with tears. Angela saw her chance. You can still make him proud, she said. Put the detonator down. Let us help you. For a moment, the tension was unbearable. Then slowly, the man lowered his arm. He didn't drop the detonator, but his grip loosened. Angela exhaled, relief washing over her. But just as she thought the danger was over, a sudden deafening explosion rocked the building, not from the man, but from somewhere else in the courthouse. Angela's heart sank. What was that? She shouted into her radio. Mitchell's voice came through, panicked. Chief, we've got reports of a third device. It's already gone off. Angela turned back to the young man, whose face had gone pale with shock. Where are the others? She demanded. How many bombs did you plant? He stammered, his voice trembling. T3, but I didn't set them all. Angela's stomach dropped. The worst wasn't over, it was just beginning. Angela's pulse quickened as the young man's trembling words sank in. 3 bombs. 1 already detonated. 2 more potentially active. Where are the others? Angela demanded, her voice sharp but measured, trying to keep the young man focused. His wide, tear-filled eyes darted around, panic consuming him. I don't know where they are. Eric, he didn't tell me. I swear I just had this one. Angela's gut churned. This wasn't just about him anymore. Eric had orchestrated something much bigger. Her radio crackled as Mitchell's voice came through, strained. Chief, the first explosion hit the main conference room on the 3rd floor. Structural damage is extensive. No confirmed casualties yet, but there are injuries. Angela clenched her jaw. Mitchell, I need an immediate evacuation of the building. We've got 2 more devices unaccounted for. Get everyone out and set up a wider perimeter. I want medics on site ASAP. Understood, Mitchell replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. Angela turned back to the young man, who was now slumping against the wall, the detonator dangling loosely in his hand. She approached slowly, her hands still raised. You've got to help me, she said, her tone softer but firm. Eric might not have told you everything, but you know something. Think. Where would he put the other devices? I don't know, he sobbed. I swear I don't. He told me to stay here and wait. He said this was the big one. Angela's radio crackled again. This time it was Ramirez. Chief, we've cleared the courtroom and surrounding areas. All hostages are safe, but we're hearing reports of suspicious packages on the 1st floor and the judge's chambers. Bomb squad is en route to investigate. Angela's mind raced. If there were bombs in those locations, the entire building could still be at risk. She glanced at the young man's chest, where the device was still strapped. The bomb squad leader was standing a few feet behind her, ready to move in. She nodded slightly, signaling for him to take over. The bomb squad leader stepped forward cautiously, his voice calm. I'm here to get that device off you, okay? We're going to do this safely, but I need you to stay still. The young man nodded numbly, tears streaking his face. Angela stepped back to give the bomb squad room to work, but her focus remained razor-sharp. The moment stretched into tense silence as the leader carefully assessed the device. Finally, he muttered into his radio, "I've got it stabilized. Disarming now." Angela exhaled slowly, but the relief was short-lived. Her radio buzzed again. "Chief, this is Mitchell. We've located the second device on the first floor near the main entrance. It's active, and the timer's running. Less than 5 minutes." Angela's stomach turned. "Status of the third device?" she asked urgently. "Still searching," Mitchell replied. "No sign of it yet." Angela turned to the bomb squad leader. "Can you handle this device on your own?" He nodded. "I've got it under control, Chief. Go." Angela didn't waste another second. She sprinted up the stairs, her mind focused on the ticking clock. The first floor was a flurry of activity as officers evacuated the remaining staff and civilians. The bomb squad was clustered near the entrance, where a small black suitcase sat ominously against the wall, wires protruding from its sides. "Report," Angela barked as she approached. One of the technicians glanced up. "Timer reads 3 minutes, 50 seconds. We've got a lot of redundant wiring. It's going to take time to disarm." Angela nodded, her mind racing. "Do what you can. I'll coordinate from here." As the bomb squad worked, Angela's radio crackled again. This time it was Ramirez. "Chief, we've got the third device. It's in the judge's chambers, and the timer's already running. 7 minutes left." Angela felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. 2 active bombs, ticking down at the same time, in different locations. If one of them detonated, the damage would be catastrophic. "Mitchell, are all civilians out of the building?" she asked. "Not yet," he replied. "The south wing is still clearing out, but we're almost there." Angela turned to the bomb squad technician closest to her. "How confident are you about disarming this one in time?" The technician hesitated. "It's a 50-50 shot, Chief. If I cut the wrong wire, we're done." Angela made a quick decision. "Focus on the judge's chambers. That's the more critical location. I'll get this floor evacuated." The technician nodded and relayed the order to his team. Angela turned to the officers nearby. "I want every remaining person out of this building now. Sweep every room and get them clear. Move." The officers scrambled into action as Angela ran toward the south wing. The halls were eerily silent now, the weight of the threat hanging heavy in the air. She found a group of courthouse clerks huddled near an emergency exit, their faces pale with fear. "Is everyone here?" Angela asked, her voice steady but urgent. One of the clerks shook her head. "No, Judge Harper's assistant is still in her office. She went back to grab something and hasn't come out." Angela's stomach sank. She glanced at her watch. Less than 2 minutes left on the first bomb. "Get out now," she ordered. "I'll get her." She sprinted down the hall toward the assistant's office. When she arrived, she found a young woman frantically stuffing papers into her bag. "We have to leave." Angela shouted. "I can't," the woman cried. "These files." "Leave them." Angela snapped. "Your life is more important." The woman hesitated for a fraction of a second before dropping the papers and running toward the exit. Angela followed close behind, her heart pounding as the seconds ticked away. Just as they reached the stairwell, a deafening boom shook the building. Angela instinctively threw herself over the assistant, shielding her from the falling debris. Dust and smoke filled the air, and Angela's ears rang from the explosion. When the dust began to settle, Angela helped the assistant to her feet. "Are you hurt?" she asked. The woman shook her head, coughing. "No, I'm okay." Angela grabbed her radio. "Mitchell, status." "First bomb just detonated," Mitchell replied, his voice strained. "Structural damage to the first floor, but most of the civilians were out. Minimal injuries reported so far." "What about the third bomb?" Angela asked, her voice tight. "Bomb squad's still working on it," Mitchell said. "We've got less than 3 minutes." Angela's jaw tightened. She turned to the assistant. "Get outside and stay there. Don't stop for anything." The woman nodded and ran toward the exit. Angela didn't follow. Instead, she turned and sprinted toward the judge's chambers, where the third bomb was still ticking down. She wasn't going to leave until this was over. Angela raced through the smoke-filled hallways, her lungs burning as the acrid air stung her throat. The courthouse groaned under the weight of the explosion's aftermath, dust swirling in the dim emergency lighting. Every step brought her closer to the judge's chambers, where the third bomb was counting down its final moments. Her radio crackled. It was the bomb squad leader, his voice tense. "Chief, we're down to 90 seconds on the judge's chambers device. We're trying to bypass the trigger, but this one's more complex. If you're nearby, we might need a second set of eyes." "I'm almost there," Angela said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. She pushed through a heavy wooden door and found herself in the long corridor leading to the judge's chambers. A few officers stood at the far end, ushering out the last remaining civilians. As Angela reached the entrance to the chambers, she saw the bomb squad huddled around a sleek black device nestled in the corner of the room. Wires of every color snaked out of it, connecting to what looked like a makeshift pressure plate. A timer on the device blinked ominously, 1 minute and 22 seconds. The leader of the squad looked up as Angela approached. "This is bad, Chief," he said. "The pressure plate's rigged to detonate if we move it, and the timer's tied to a failsafe. We've got one shot to disarm this thing." Angela crouched beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the device. "What's your assessment?" The technician wiped sweat from his brow. "There are 3 possible trigger wires, but only one will deactivate the timer. The others will trip the failsafe." Angela nodded, her mind racing. "What's the margin for error?" "None," the technician said grimly. "If we guess wrong, this room, and everyone in it, is gone." The timer ticked down, 1 minute and 10 seconds. Angela felt the weight of the decision bearing down on her. "What's your gut telling you?" she asked the technician. He hesitated. "The red wire looks like the primary trigger, but there's redundancy in the circuitry. It could be a decoy." Angela's gaze flicked to the other wires. The green one was connected to a secondary circuit, and the blue one disappeared under a small panel on the device. She considered the possibilities, her years of training kicking in. "Let's eliminate the decoys. What happens if we cut the blue wire?" "Hard to say," the technician admitted. "It could disable the failsafe, or it could trigger the detonation." The timer flashed, 45 seconds. Angela's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "We don't have time for what-ifs. Cut the blue wire." The technician swallowed hard but nodded. He reached for his wire cutters, his hands shaking slightly. Angela placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You've got this," she said. With a deep breath, the technician snipped the blue wire. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, the fail-safe circuit powered down, and the timer froze at 30 seconds. A collective sigh of relief filled the room, but Angela wasn't done yet. "All right, now the red wire. Let's finish this." The technician nodded and cut the red wire with precision. The device emitted a faint whir, and the timer went dark. "It's disarmed," he said, his voice shaking with relief. "We're clear." Angela stood up, her chest heaving as the tension began to release. "Excellent work," she said, clapping the technician on the back. "Let's get this thing out of here and secured." But just as she turned to leave, her radio buzzed with a frantic voice. "Chief, we've got a problem." Angela froze. "What now?" "It's Eric," Mitchell said, his tone urgent. "He somehow escaped custody during the commotion. We've got officers in pursuit, but he's armed and dangerous. He's heading toward the south exit." Angela's blood ran cold. Eric wasn't finished yet, and she knew he wouldn't stop until he took someone else down with him. Angela sprinted through the courthouse halls, her body running on pure adrenaline. She'd already faced bombs and chaos, but Eric's escape raised the stakes to a whole new level. He was desperate, dangerous, and more unpredictable than ever. The south exit came into view, and Angela spotted a group of officers gathered near the doorway. "Where is he?" she barked as she approached. One of the officers pointed toward a side corridor. "He went that way, Chief. We've got units closing in on him from both ends." Angela nodded, her hand instinctively resting on her holstered weapon. "Keep this exit secure. No one gets in or out until I say so." She moved cautiously down the side corridor, her senses on high alert. The faint sound of footsteps echoed ahead, growing louder with each passing second. She drew her gun, holding it steady as she rounded the corner. There he was. Eric, his face twisted in rage, was holding a gun to the head of a terrified courthouse clerk. The young woman sobbed, her hands trembling as Eric dragged her toward a side door. "Eric!" Angela shouted, her voice cutting through the tense air. "Let her go." Eric whipped around, his grip tightening on the clerk. "Stay back," he snarled. "I'll kill her, I swear I will." "You don't want to do this," Angela said, her voice calm but firm. She kept her gun trained on him, her eyes locked on his. "This isn't going to end the way you think. You don't know anything about me." Eric snapped. "You think I'm scared to die? I've got nothing left to lose." Angela stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. "You're wrong," she said. "You still have a chance to make this right. Killing her won't fix anything, it'll only make things worse for you." Eric's eyes darted around, his desperation palpable. Angela could see his hand trembling, his grip on the gun faltering. "Put the gun down," she said softly. "Let her go. You're not alone in this." For a moment, it seemed like Eric might listen. His hand lowered slightly, and the clerk sobbed harder. But then, a voice crackled over Angela's radio, loud enough for Eric to hear. "Chief, SWAT is in position. We're ready to engage." Eric's face twisted in fury. "You lied to me," he shouted, raising the gun again. Time slowed as Angela made her move. She fired a single shot, the sound deafening in the confined space. The bullet struck Eric in the shoulder, forcing him to drop the gun and release the clerk. She stumbled forward, collapsing into Angela's arms. Eric fell to the ground, clutching his shoulder and groaning in pain. Angela kicked the gun away and signaled for the officers to move in. They cuffed Eric swiftly, securing him before he could resist further. Angela's breath came in heavy bursts as she steadied the shaken clerk. "You're safe now," she said, her voice soft but resolute. Eric glared up at her, his face pale. "You think this is over," he spat. "It's not. You can stop me, but there are more out there, people like me who won't let this system keep crushing us." Angela met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Maybe so," she said quietly. "But today, you didn't win." As Eric was hauled away, Angela leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up to her. The courthouse was still standing, the hostages were safe, and the bombs were disarmed. But she knew this wasn't the end. Eric's words lingered in her mind, a haunting reminder of the deeper battles still to come. The courthouse fell into an eerie silence after Eric was taken away. Angela stood by the south exit, her breathing finally beginning to steady. Officers moved methodically, securing the area, assisting the wounded, and clearing out debris. The bomb squad was carefully removing the last device from the judge's chambers, and medics tended to those injured by the first explosion. Despite the chaos, Angela knew she had to keep moving. "Chief," Mitchell's voice crackled over her radio, pulling her back to the moment. "We've got a preliminary casualty report. 2 confirmed dead from the first explosion. 10 injured, 5 critically. No casualties from the other bombs." Angela closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of the news. Every loss stung, even when it could have been worse. "Understood," she replied. "Have the families of the victims been notified?" "Not yet," Mitchell said. "We're still identifying them." "Let me know as soon as you have names," Angela said. "I'll handle the notifications personally." "Will do, Chief," Mitchell responded. Angela turned and walked back toward the command post set up outside the courthouse. The air was thick with tension, a mix of relief and residual fear. Onlookers crowded behind police barricades, their voices a murmur of speculation and concern. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashing as they tried to capture every angle of the unfolding aftermath. As Angela approached, Ramirez met her with a grim expression. "We've got another problem," he said. Angela's shoulders tensed. "What now?" "Eric's phone," Ramirez said, holding up a clear evidence bag containing a cracked smartphone. "The tech team just pulled his call history. He's been in contact with someone else, someone we haven't identified yet." Angela's eyes narrowed. "How recent are the calls?" "Last one was less than an hour before the courthouse attack," Ramirez said. "Whoever it is, they could be part of this." Angela took the evidence bag and studied the phone. "Any leads on tracking them?" "Tech's working on it," Ramirez said. "They're trying to trace the number, but it's likely a burner. Could take some time." Angela nodded, her mind racing. Eric's words before his arrest replayed in her head. There are more out there. This wasn't just about him. He was part of something larger, and now the pieces were starting to come together. Back at the police station, Angela sat in the war room with her senior officers, reviewing everything they'd gathered so far. The evidence board was a chaotic collage of photos, documents, and timelines. Eric's face stared back at her from a mugshot, his expression defiant even in custody. Mitchell pointed to a series of surveillance photos taken from around the courthouse earlier that day. "We think this guy might be our lead," he said, tapping an image of a tall man in a hoodie and sunglasses. He was seen entering the courthouse through a service entrance shortly before the attack began. No ID yet, but he matches the description of someone seen with Eric a few weeks ago. Angela leaned forward, studying the photo. "Do we have anything else on him? Prints? Witnesses?" "Not yet," Mitchell said. "But we're combing through footage from nearby businesses. If he's local, we'll find him." Angela's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, a call from an unknown number. Her instincts flared, and she answered cautiously. "This is Chief Porter." A deep, distorted voice came through the line. "Chief Porter. You've been busy today." Angela's grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you're up against," the voice replied. "You think taking Eric down solves anything? You're wrong. He's just the beginning." Angela signaled to Mitchell, who immediately started tracing the call. "If you're so confident," Angela said, keeping her voice calm, "why don't you tell me who you are?" The voice chuckled. "You're smart, Chief. You'll figure it out soon enough. But don't get too comfortable. Today was just a warning." The line went dead. Angela slammed the phone down, her frustration mounting. "Did we get a trace?" she asked Mitchell. He shook his head. "No luck. They routed the call through multiple servers. It's untraceable." Angela exhaled sharply, her mind churning. Whoever they were watching closely, and they weren't finished. Hours later, Angela sat alone in her office, the weight of the day pressing down on her. She stared at the photos and documents spread across her desk, searching for connections, for anything that could give her a clearer picture of what she was up against. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Ramirez, carrying a folder. "Chief, we just got this from the lab. It's Eric's journal." Angela gestured for him to sit and opened the folder. The journal was filled with chaotic, scrawled handwriting, pages full of anger, pain, and plans. She flipped through, her eyes catching on certain phrases. "They'll listen when it's too late. The system failed us. The next wave is ready." Her blood ran cold. "The next wave," she murmured. "It's not over." Ramirez leaned in. "There's a list at the back," he said. "Names, locations, possible targets. We think it's part of their plan." Angela turned to the list, her heart sinking. The names included city officials, business leaders, and public spaces frequented by thousands of people. If the group behind Eric was planning another attack, the potential devastation was staggering. "We need to move on this immediately," Angela said, her voice firm. "Get teams on surveillance at every location on this list. Double security for anyone named here. And find out if anyone on this list has been threatened recently." Ramirez nodded. "On it." Angela leaned back in her chair, exhaustion battling with determination. Eric's arrest had been a victory, but it was clear now that it was only a small part of a much larger battle. Somewhere out there, someone was pulling the strings, and Angela knew she couldn't rest until she found them. As Ramirez left the room, Angela's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from another unknown number. It read, "Tick-tock, Chief. The clock's still ticking." Angela stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. Whoever they were taunting her, and she wasn't about to let them win. Angela stared at the cryptic text, her mind spinning. The phone felt heavier in her hand as she contemplated the implications. "Tick-tock, Chief. The clock's still ticking." It wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. The group behind Eric wasn't just planning, they were in motion. Angela immediately forwarded the message to her tech team. "Trace this number," she instructed via text. She rose from her desk and headed to the operations center, where officers were actively coordinating efforts to secure the targets listed in Eric's journal. As she entered, Mitchell approached with urgency. "Chief, we've got movement on one of the locations," he said, pointing to a map displayed on the central screen. A suspicious vehicle was spotted near the mayor's residence. Unmarked van, no plates, and it's parked across the street. Angela's stomach tightened. The mayor's residence was one of the highest priority locations on the list. Do we have units on site? She asked. Yes, 2 patrol cars, Mitchell replied. They've secured the perimeter, but they're keeping their distance to avoid spooking anyone inside. Angela nodded. I'm heading over. Keep me updated on any other developments. The night was thick with tension as Angela arrived at the mayor's residence. The stately brick house was bathed in soft yellow light, a stark contrast to the dark van parked across the street. Officers stood at strategic points around the property, their eyes scanning the quiet neighborhood. Angela approached the patrol sergeant. What's the status? She asked. We've run the plates on the van. Nothing in the system, he said. No movement from inside, but the windows are tinted. We can't see a thing. Angela studied the vehicle, her instincts on high alert. Do we have thermal imaging? On its way, the sergeant replied. ETA 3 minutes. Angela turned her attention to the house. The mayor and his family were likely inside, unaware of the potential danger just feet away. She grabbed her radio. This is Chief Porter. I'm initiating contact with the mayor. Maintain your positions and don't approach the van until we have more intel. She moved quickly to the front door, knocked firmly, and identified herself. A few moments later the mayor, a tall man in his late 50s, opened the door, his face lined with worry. Chief Porter, what's going on? He asked. We have reason to believe your residence might be under surveillance, Angela said. We need to secure you and your family immediately. The mayor's wife appeared in the doorway, clutching a young boy by the shoulders. Her eyes widened with fear. Is it safe? She asked. Angela's voice was calm but firm. We're taking every precaution. Please gather your family and follow me to the patrol cars. They'll transport you to a secure location. The mayor nodded, and the family moved quickly to comply. Angela escorted them to one of the waiting cars, her eyes darting back to the van every few seconds. The stillness of the vehicle unnerved her. As the patrol car carrying the mayor's family pulled away, an officer approached with a thermal imaging device. Chief, we've got it, he said. Angela took the device and aimed it at the van. The screen lit up with heat signatures, 3 figures inside. One was seated at the front, and the other 2 appeared to be in the back, crouched over something. Her gut told her what that something was. Get the bomb squad here now, Angela ordered, handing the thermal device back to the officer. She turned to the patrol sergeant. Have your team block off the surrounding streets. I want a full perimeter. No one gets in or out. Yes, ma'am, the sergeant replied, barking orders to his team. Angela's radio crackled. It was Mitchell. Chief, we've just intercepted another message. It's an audio file, sent to your phone. Angela pulled her phone from her pocket and opened the message. The distorted voice from earlier began to speak. You're quick, Chief. But are you quick enough? 3 minutes. That's all you have. Let's see how much you really care about your precious city. Angela's blood ran cold. She glanced at her watch. If the message was accurate, the van was rigged to detonate in less than 3 minutes. Mitchell, she said into her radio, her voice clipped. I need that bomb squad here now. They're en route, Mitchell replied. ETA 2 minutes. Not good enough, Angela muttered. She turned to the officers nearby. Evacuate the surrounding houses. Get everyone as far away from this van as possible. The officers moved swiftly, knocking on doors and ushering residents out of their homes. Angela's heart pounded as the seconds ticked away. She knew she couldn't wait for the bomb squad. If she didn't act now, dozens of lives could be lost. She grabbed her radio again. This is Chief Porter. I'm approaching the vehicle. Chief, wait. Mitchell's voice cut through the static. You don't know what's in there. Exactly, Angela said, her tone resolute. And I'm not about to find out the hard way. Hold your position. She moved cautiously toward the van, her weapon drawn. The air was thick with tension as she reached the driver's side door. With her free hand, she tried the handle. It was locked. She peered through the tinted window but could only make out faint shapes inside. Police, she called out. Step out of the vehicle with your hands up. No response. Angela stepped back and motioned for an officer to bring the battering ram. Moments later, the tool was in her hands. With a powerful swing, she shattered the driver's side window. Glass rained down as she reached inside to unlock the door. The heat signature from the driver's seat had shifted. It was empty. Where are they? Angela muttered under her breath. She climbed into the van, her eyes scanning the dim interior. The back of the vehicle was a jumbled mess of wires, canisters, and a large metallic device with a digital timer. The timer read, 48 seconds. Angela's chest tightened. The bomb squad wasn't going to make it in time. She grabbed her radio. Mitchell, I need immediate guidance on disarming a device. Patch me through to the bomb squad lead. Stand by, Mitchell said, his voice tense. Seconds later, the bomb squad lead's voice came through. Chief, describe the device. Metal casing, wired to multiple canisters. Timers counting down. Less than 30 seconds. Do you see a red wire connected to the timer? The voice asked. Angela scanned the mess of wires. Yes. Cut it. That should disable the countdown. Angela reached for the wire cutters she always carried. Her hands were steady as she clamped down on the red wire and severed it. The timer stopped at 7 seconds. Angela let out a shaky breath, her body sagging with relief. Timer stopped, she said into the radio. Device is stable. Bomb squad can handle the rest. The team arrived moments later, securing the device and sweeping the van for additional threats. Angela stepped outside, the weight of the day pressing down on her. The mayor's family was safe, and the bomb had been defused, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was far from over. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. Nice save, Chief. But you're only delaying the inevitable. Angela stared at the message, her jaw tightening. Whoever was behind this wasn't finished. And neither was she. Angela stood in the dim light of the street, the taunting text message burning in her mind. The chilling message wasn't just a threat, it was a game, and the mastermind wanted her to keep playing. She clenched her fists, her breath steadying as she prepared for what was coming next. Mitchell, Angela said into her radio, her voice sharper than ever, I need our tech team to double their efforts. Whoever's sending these messages is tracking our every move. Find them now. Understood, Chief, Mitchell replied. We're already pulling data from the intercepted calls and texts. We'll get a lead soon. Angela turned to Ramirez, who was overseeing the bomb squad's cleanup. How secure is that device? Fully neutralized, Ramirez confirmed. No further threats in the immediate area. Angela nodded, her mind already moving ahead. She didn't believe for a second that the van was the endgame. There were too many unanswered questions. Who was Eric working with? Who else was part of this group? And most pressing, where would they strike next? Her thoughts were interrupted by a junior officer rushing up to her, a tablet in hand. Chief, we just got access to Eric's last known locations from his phone's GPS. One of them matches a warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's a known hotspot for illegal activity. Angela took the tablet, studying the data. Do we have surveillance on the warehouse? Not yet, the officer replied. But we're mobilizing a drone team to get visuals. Angela made a decision. That's not fast enough. We're going in. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, its rusted exterior bathed in the cold glow of floodlights. Angela arrived with a tactical team, their movements silent and coordinated. The air was thick with tension as they surrounded the building, weapons drawn. Thermal imaging shows at least 5 heat signatures inside, one of the officers reported. Possible suspects, but we can't confirm if they're armed. Angela nodded. We proceed with caution. Ramirez, take the rear entrance with your team. Mitchell, you're with me on the front. On my signal, we breach. The officers moved into position, their footsteps muffled against the gravel. Angela adjusted her headset, her focus razor-sharp. 3, 2, 1. Breach. The doors burst open simultaneously, the team flooding into the warehouse. Angela swept her weapon across the room, her eyes scanning for threats. The space was cluttered with crates, machinery, and scattered tools. In the center of the room, a group of men froze, their hands halfway to their weapons. Drop your weapons. Angela shouted. Now. The suspects hesitated, but the sight of multiple officers closing in forced their compliance. They dropped their guns and raised their hands. Angela stepped forward, her gun trained on the man in the center, a wiry figure with cold, calculating eyes. Where's your boss? Angela demanded. The man smirked. Boss? You're looking at him. Angela didn't buy it. Don't play games with me. Who's running this operation? The man's smirk widened. You don't get it, do you, Chief? This isn't an operation. It's a movement. And you can't stop it. Angela's jaw tightened. We'll see about that. Take them in, she ordered her team. As the suspects were cuffed and led away, Angela's eyes fell on a table covered in blueprints, maps, and handwritten notes. She moved closer, her stomach tightening as she recognized the locations marked on the maps: government buildings, schools, hospitals. Each one was circled in red, with dates and times scrawled beside them. Mitchell, Angela called out, gesturing to the maps. Get these to the analysts. This is a timeline for their next attacks. Mitchell nodded, quickly gathering the documents. Angela turned her attention to a laptop sitting on the table, its screen still glowing. She clicked through the files, finding encrypted messages and spreadsheets listing names, materials, and transactions. Chief, Mitchell said, his voice low. There's more here than we thought. This isn't just a local group. It's a network. Angela's blood ran cold. How far does it go? Mitchell hesitated. From what I can tell, nationwide. Back at the station, Angela convened an emergency meeting with her senior team. The evidence from the warehouse painted a grim picture. This wasn't an isolated attack, it was the tip of the iceberg. The group had connections in multiple cities, each cell preparing for coordinated strikes. We need to act fast, Angela said, her voice firm. Contact the FBI and Homeland Security. They need to see this. Ramirez spoke up. What about the people we arrested? Do you think they'll talk? They will, Angela said with certainty. Because I'm going to make them. Angela sat across from the wiry man in the interrogation room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on his face. His smirk had faded, replaced by a guarded expression. Angela leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. Let me make this simple, she said. You tell me everything you know, or I promise you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you had. The man met her gaze, his confidence wavering. You think scaring me will work? You have no idea what you're up against. Angela's eyes narrowed. Then enlighten me. Who's pulling the strings? The man hesitated, then leaned back in his chair. You're too late, Chief. The clock's ticking, and you can't stop what's coming. Angela's patience wore thin. She stood, her fists clenched. Maybe not, but I'll make sure you never see the outside of a prison cell again. As she left the room, her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. You're getting closer, Angela. But are you ready for the final move? Angela stared at the message, her resolve hardening. She didn't know who was behind the taunts, but one thing was clear: they wanted her to keep chasing. And she would, until she brought them down.